Hi, this is Savannah,
And this is Brian from the Dorky Diva Show,
and you're listening to Star Wars.
the best place for below average Star Wars.
In a world where people need 80s and 90s movie reviews, two regular Geordies combine forces to bring you the Brother to Brother 80s and 90s movie review podcast. Check them out on Twitter, YouTube, and all decent podcast vendors.
Welcome to Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, the best place for below average Star Wars. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete.
And I'm Jason Hondo Ling.
And I'm Kat Riesielke.
And you guessed it, we are back to talk more the Book of Boba Fett, or should that be The Mandalorian Season 2.5. So yes, we're back. We're going to be talking Book of Boba Fett. We're going to be reviewing episode 5, which is called Chapter 5, Return of the Mandalorian. It's written by Jon Favreau and it's directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. Obviously, we made a joke there, reference that this sort of episode doesn't really focus on Boba at all. It's very much a Mandalorian episode. An awesome Mandalorian episode, in my opinion. Let's go straight to you, Jason. Sort of, what were your thoughts when you realised that this was going to be a Mandalorian episode?
From the title, obviously, it was pretty obvious. I was hoping it was going to be more of bring the Mandalorian into it, and then we were going to carry on with the story of the Book of Boba Fett. So initially, at my first viewing, I was quite cross because I just wanted to get back into the Book of Boba Fett story. Having watched it another 2 times, I sort of took that head off of my shoulders and enjoyed it as an episode, to all intents and purposes, of The Mandalorian, linking it to the Book of Boba Fett. And in hindsight, also, I sort of felt we had quite a lot. The last 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett gave us quite a lot to chew on. By stepping back, this has given us sort of chance to prepare for what's coming in the final 2 episodes. So, in hindsight, I actually really love this episode, but I did go in a bit tentative.
Yeah, I think I definitely see what you mean. If this was a 22 episode season, like the TV shows of old, then yeah, we can spend time seeing other characters on adventures. But I think with it only being sort of a 7 episode season, and the show is named after the title character Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, I can totally see why you sort of had those thoughts. It took me by surprise, but I think because the episode was so good, I just didn't care, and it sort of it dealt with a lot. It dealt with a lot of things I cared about. So it dealt with sort of what did the Mando do, sort of after the events of season 2, and looks like the answer is he's went in search of his clan to find them, to sort of get back on track with what he was doing before he found Grogu. He's gone back to do what he was doing before he found Grogu. Kat, let's go to you. Sort of, we didn't know what we were going to expect because it's all been kept under wraps. But what were your thoughts when we got this Mandalorian episode instead of a Boba Fett episode?
Well, you remember when we were talking about who could turn up to help Boba Fett, I was very skeptical of them bringing Din Djarin back into the series, but I was absolutely blown away by this episode, and it completely wasn't what I was expecting, and yet the story was just so good. I mean, you're right, it is basically sort of the Mandalorian 2.5, but I think it actually works because having this whole episode devoted to Din Djarin and sort of the events immediately after the Mandalorian season 2, the focus is just on him, on the Mando. And I think now when we go into chapter 6 and 7, where we probably will return to Boba Fett on Tatooine, he and Din Djarin, they won't be fighting for screen time or screen presence. We've had our Mando fix. We're going to go back to Boba Fett, and I think it's going to work now really nicely, because we've got this build up to Din Djarin's character, and I think having that pause, like Jason said, actually has worked in the season's favour.
What I loved was I think they knew exactly what they were doing with us. The way this episode shot, that opening sequence where, behind the fridge curtains in this meat factory, the silhouette of a Mandalorian, and obviously this is the Book of Boba Fett, so everyone thinks it's Boba Fett. But then when the character steps through the curtains, it's Mando, and we get, not only do we see him at that point, but then we also get the Mando tune, sort of Mando music cues in. Which I thought was just sort of perfect. Let's start with the beginning of the episode, the opening sequence of sort of Mando tracking this bounty down. I love the fact we got a lot of classic Mando stuff. It was Mando coming through a door, which is how we first met Mando in Mando Season 1. Although it wasn't like a proper electronic door, but it was a doorway where he was concealed, and then he come through into the room, and he goes to a group of people, he has a conversation. It reintroduced us to the tracking fobs and the bounty pucks, which I thought was also very interesting. And then we got a sort of a pretty gruesome capture of the bounty, but an angry capture where, I think in Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 1, when, he traps I can't recall, but the squid heads from Mon Cala, he traps one of them in the doorway. It was more of a strategic kill, if that makes sense. And that guy wasn't the bounty anyway, but the henchman he kills that way. But this is, Mando ends up getting hurt, and he ends up unleashing the Darksaber very vengefully. Let's go to you, Kat, first. What were your thoughts on sort of this opening sequence and sort of the Mandalorian tracking this bounty down?
I love this opening sequence. It was very proper sort of Mandalorian, because it's quite dark and gritty. The meat factory actually reminded me quite a bit of a similar sequence in Daredevil Season 2, where Daredevil is tracking the Mexican cartel in the meatpacking district of New York. So that was quite interesting, because we're bringing in this very real life setting into Star Wars. At first, I wasn't quite sure it would work, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, we have seen Star Wars characters eating plenty. So bringing in this new location was very interesting, and it provides this sort of dark, gringy atmosphere for the bounty that Din Djarin's collecting, and he delivers his classic line: "I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold." And here, rather than carbonite, he's obviously referring to bringing you in cold, because he's going to bring you in dead. And then, he unleashes with that Darksaber. Seeing Mando with the Darksaber, what a moment. I think I quite liked, actually, how it was done in this sort of... There's nothing graceful about this fight. It's just very raw, very visceral, because Din Djarin is not a Force user. He doesn't actually know how to wield this blade, and he's only using it because he has to fight off so many of them, of these Claytonians. And he does then sort of full Obi-Wan mode, chops the guy in half, but then goes one step further and takes his head off, and it's just like, whoa, hardcore. But also, I think that's sort of, he's no longer got Grogu, so he's no longer holding back, and he's being sort of that Mandalorian that we first meet in Season 1 before he finds the child. So, it's a very powerful opening sequence, because it returns us to Din Djarin and his character, using sort of all these cues that we know from Mandalorian season 1. And yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the things I noticed that, he goes for his blaster, and then, one of the guards ends up sort of biting his hand. He drops the blaster, and he has no choice but to sort of pick up the Darksaber to fend them off. It's very much a reflex action. I don't think that would have been his first choice weapon, but he has to go to it because he's in a struggle now. And like I said, he stabs one of the guards straight through the chest. He slices one in half, like a normal guard in half, like before he slices the boss in half, and then ends up having to slice his head off. But one thing I noticed was that he stabs the boss with a vibro blade first in the chest, and then like stabs him with it, then like puts him against the desk. So the guy's like dead at that point, but then he still like slices him straight through the desk. Sort of very violent, but also like I think it's a reflex action to the pain he's in. Because Jason, I'm not quite sure if you noticed it, but Mando gets injured here, and it's by his own Darksaber, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Which obviously later on comes into the story of the Darksaber. And the whole thing, it's quite fun in this episode that we do see Mando wielding a weapon that he's not completely comfortable with. And he's still obviously learning about the Darksaber. But yeah, because obviously we find out later that the reason he hurts himself is because the more he uses the blade, the heavier it gets. And that goes back to the Rebels episodes where we see Sabine training with the Darksaber, and she says she didn't realise how heavy it could be. Which also means, there's this mythology of the curse behind the Darksaber. So it's almost like the person who wields it has a heavy burden to carry, because in the long run they're going to be responsible for the whole of Mandalore. So I quite liked, that we saw this. It's not going to be an easy task, and just because you've got the Darksaber doesn't mean you're going to be able to wield it and be this all-powerful warrior.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think some of the stories that the Armor tells him here, I mean, she's pretty much a cultist. She's basically Charles Manson, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But, so I don't buy into necessarily what she's saying is the truth, but I think obviously, it is a lightsaber, it is a kyber crystal. They are, for lack of a better term, they are alive, so they interact with the user. And if it's a user that's not used to, or a user that's not fully in line with, it can characteristically act differently. I think obviously, it gets a bit heavy as he's using it, and then also I think one of the guards does knock it into him as well, if you know what I mean. It's in the chaos of the fight, and he doesn't know how to handle a weapon like that. Going sort of from this scene to when he comes out with the head in the bag, and obviously the normal schmucks of the species are sort of looking at him, and he's like, "There's credits inside. Take those. I've just come for this one guy." And then they all sort of run in to get the credits, and he ends up limping out. What were your thoughts on the next sequence, Jason? Obviously, the Mando traveling to meet the people who are going to pay the bounty.
I loved the sequence where he got into the elevator, and there's
that's a classic.
Yeah, it's the whole. Everyone's been in an uncomfortable situation in an elevator where you're in there with a complete stranger. You don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. You're just waiting for that door to open so that you can get the hell out of there. And I think this is exactly what they captured. And this is one thing I love about this whole episode, and also going back to just before that, where you saw, he offered these people the choice. They could kill him, or they could let him go and get the money that they'd been deserved because they'd probably been underpaid. And I have to say, seeing some of these scenes and the way they were directed, I just can't. Bryce Dallas Howard cannot do wrong as far as I'm concerned. And I think there was a lot of human nature and the almost in the characterizations of the different characters that she'd done. And I did think, you've got this travelling up in the elevator. Then obviously he goes into this room and there's this mass of different aliens all sat round a table, which sort of brought back memories for me of Canto Bight. And I also think, seeing this strange planet that he seemed to be on, or well, not really a planet, it was a ring. And I think that whole place, it just to me felt like somewhere again it had been built for the rich and the powerful, but then there's this underbelly of it which we see again in the next few scenes where there's people that are existing under the radar, which is something that we always see in Star Wars. Saw it on Coruscant, you see it in the different places on Tatooine. So there's still this undercurrent of the wealthy and the not so wealthy.
Kat, what were your thoughts on sort of us meeting the person who put the bounty on the head of the guy who Mando has just beheaded?
Oh, she's a proper mob boss of her. She's got her table full of aliens, and there's an Aqualish there. The Aqualish are always bad guys in Star Wars. Jabba the Hutt had one as an accountant, and they're always part of the criminal underworld. It was really great sort of seeing all those species together around a table. It shows that the crime syndicates and sort of the mob bosses of the Star Wars world, they're not just humans. Every sort of alien race is profiting from it. But I love what Mando just walks in, he wants his money, and then he just says about the head, put it on ice. And it's just such an unbelievable line. It's like, ice you reserve for nice champagnes and wines, but no. If you're a Mandalorian, you've got to put your chopped off head on ice. That had me laughing.
I like how she was trying to get him to stay for a meal because she had another job for him, but he was having none of it. Essentially, Mando's essentially he's done this job to get the information to find his clan's hideout, so that he can rejoin the clan because that's the only life he knows outside of Grogu.
And I also think in that moment, because she says, come break bread with us, and I think he realizes to eat that he would have to take off his helmet, and I think because he's looking for his clan again, he doesn't want to take off his helmet, so that's an undercurrent running in his mind, which will obviously factor in only a few scenes later.
Yep. So Mando gets the directions to find the Mandalorian clan. We see him sort of go down to the underbellies of the space station. Do we know, does this space station / inhabited area have a name yet? Do we know?
This is one thing that's infuriating me about the Book of Boba Fett is none of the characters and places are getting names.
There's very little information coming out about stuff like that. So I'm hoping we're going to get a massive gallery episodes after 2 weeks. Well, next week now. So.
I mean, I'm just waiting for the art of book in the visual dictionary, hopefully, and then we can get some nice big drawings and big descriptions of some of these places, in particular this one, because this place looks fantastic. So yeah, Mando goes down to the underbelly. He uses changes his sensors on his helmet so he can see the invisible ink, and he follows the symbols to the Mandalorian clan hideout, where he meets back up with the armorer who was the head of his clan in the first season of The Mandalorian, and obviously big Paz Vizsla is still there as well. Paz Vizsla didn't seem to be voiced by Jon Favreau anymore. Did anybody notice that?
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same, and I looked in the credits and I couldn't see Jon Favreau's name mentioned at all.
So I just found that a bit strange. I don't know if I've got maybe he was voiced someone else in the first season. I've got it wrong, but to me, I just think if you're bringing that character back, you need to keep the voice the same.
Yeah, no, well, it was definitely John Favreau in that first season. So I don't, unless Favreau was too busy writing to be able to do the voiceover work.
But you can literally record it in your house on your foot. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it would take
Yeah.
not, or you would then find somebody with a voice similar. Like, do you know what I mean? You hire voice artists who can do an array of different voices. So I
Yeah.
just find that a bit sloppy. That is the case, and it was him in the first season, and they've gone with something completely different. In this one, it's again a little bit sloppy that we don't want to see from very expensive productions.
Definitely.
Kat, what were your thoughts on the reintroduction of Mando to the clan?
Oh, this sequence I thought was everything about this was just incredible, because I mean I love the armorer. She's just got such presence to her, and she is sort of the last of the clan, and I think almost the last to carry like the stories of the creed. And then when she sees that Din Djarin has the Darksaber, she goes into this beautiful script on basically like a prophecy about the Darksaber, and that if it is not won through combat but merely sort of given, that it basically comes of a curse that Mandalore will fall. It's very clever writing by Jon Favreau, because at the end of Mandalorian season 2, we were all left with a lot of questions, because the interaction between Din Djarin and Bo-Katan didn't make sense if you'd watched Star Wars Rebels, because the mythology of the Darksaber didn't line up. So basically, Jon Favreau and Bryce Dallas Howard have addressed a massive plot hole by giving the armorer this speech about the Darksaber. And the way she talks about it, the Darksaber is almost like Excalibur. You have to be worthy to wield it. And if you think about the weight as well, the lightsaber, it gets lighter the more worthy you are, which is a bit like Excalibur being pulled from the stone. And again, Excalibur is a sign of somebody who can rule, which is what the Darksaber represents. And I wonder if they're sort of shaping it up now for, well, I can't imagine Bo-Katan willingly hurting or killing Din Djarin. So I am actually wondering if they're sort of setting up, from what the armor has said, that Din Djarin is going to lead Mandalore.
Well, I think I took a few different things from it. I think the story is what some Mandalorians believe. So I don't necessarily think it's true, if that makes sense. So obviously we don't know. We know that Bo-Katan had the saber. I mean, bear in mind, Mandalore fell well before Bo-Katan went to try and take it back. Do you know what I mean? So it didn't fall because she had the Darksaber and got given it. Maybe in the fight to take it back, some Mandalorians didn't want to fight for her because you just got given that saber, and maybe it caused something. Maybe they just got beat because guess what, the Empire was too much. And obviously these cultists are like, oh well, we'll blame the story of the Darksaber because it's easier to do that than look at how we got outgunned by the Empire. If that makes sense. I think for Bo-Katan, she didn't mind to take it in the first place. Like when she took it from Sabine Wren, that was fine. But I think because things didn't work out the way she wanted, I think that's why she's in the mindset, I need to take it back in combat. But I think the whole story sort of a bit flawed because Sabine stole it from Maul, shouldn't fight him for it. And pre-Vizsla, it had been passed down from his family for generations since they stole it back from the temple. So there's a lot of times in the Darksaber's history where it has not been won by combat.
I just wonder actually with the Vizslas though, if maybe sort of a rite of passage is basically you have to duel the Vizsla who came before you to get the Darksaber. Because the Vizsla clan, we know, are quite violent.
Maybe, but then if they're just keeping it in their own clan though, then they're not really letting it up for like whoever. I doubt anybody else could challenge them for it. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a bit of a for me, again, I see this the way she speaks. The armorer, she's very much like a Charles Manson cult leader, where it's like, I'm not going to say much, but I'm going to give you a sentence, and because of the sentence, we've done so much, and you're going to believe what we say based on very little knowledge. You know what I mean? It's quite like a fantasy stories type of thing, which is very powerful with some people, especially when you've got nothing. And if all these people who are with her or were with her were people who were orphans, they're very easy to sort of brainwash, aren't they? But I think the Darksaber, interesting to see where it goes. Does Bo-Katan get a bit? I thought when we seen Bo-Katan in season 2 of Mandalorian, she was getting very itchy about the Darksaber, where I think I could see her trying something. Maybe she, against a better judgment, trying to fight whoever had it to prove a point, just to get it. Maybe you regret that afterwards. Don't get us wrong, but you could see it on her mind. But yeah, maybe the Darksaber become Grogu's lightsaber.
I think it's a little bit heavy for little Grogu.
Yeah, but exactly. I've just done a bit of research, guys. The planet or the ring that they appear to be on is called Glavis or Glavis. I don't know. It's spelt Glavis.
Ooh.
And I'm trying to find out, but it does look that it looks like they're saying that John. Everywhere I look is saying that John Favreau voiced Paz Vizsla in the Book of Boba Fett.
I thought he'd. All right, okay. Yeah, well,
Which I'm surprised because it didn't sound like him to me.
Maybe they like sort of changed the modulation on the voice behind the helmet.
But yeah, who could do you think from what we gained from later on in the episode, do you think the Mando is going to head back to Mandalore to try and redeem himself in the mines of Mandalore?
Absolutely. I think he's definitely going to go back there. And this also links with what the armorer said of, she talks about the legendary mythosaur, which literally only exists in the Legends timeline at the moment. And, what more of a message to send is if he goes with the Darksaber to the ruins of Mandalore and finds a mythosaur.
let's talk about, because we missed. Let's talk about. Jason, do you want to take us through the events that get us to the bit where we learn about the mines?
Yeah. So there's this fight where basically Paz Vizsla says you're not worthy to hold the Darksaber. Tries to reclaim it, and Mando wins, even though he clearly still struggles with the Darksaber. But then there's the whole thing where the armorer asks the questions. Obviously, have you ever removed your helmet? Which Paz Vizsla replies no. And then there's a lovely silent pause when she asks the Mando the same question. And you could almost feel him hanging his head in shame. And then, obviously, we have this revelation that because he's. For me, it didn't quite fit the way he sort of almost begged for forgiveness. That just didn't sit right with me for the Mando character. I thought yes, he's going to want to find a way back into the way, but I didn't think he would quite so willingly, almost like a child, say, "Oh, but please forgive me." So, but then obviously he asks for forgiveness, and we've got this whole situation where the armorer basically spells out that the only way he can gain forgiveness is by going to the mines of Mandalore, and I meant to take more of it in today to try and gain exactly how he's supposed to redeem himself there.
But I
But
think
obviously,
again, it's very cultish. It's like go and wash yourself in the lake in the
yeah,
mines, and like that'll baptize you as like a new Mandalorian again. It's like pure fantasist cultism, which
yeah,
I just like like I like the character, but like I just think you and I think and this is my takeaways from this when they're fighting over the Darksaber. There's
yeah,
a bit where Paz Vizsla kills Mando and
yes,
Armor does nothing.
yeah,
When Mando gets the upper hand and he's about to slice Paz Vizsla's neck with a vibro blade, that's when she calls an end to the duel. And then, she asks him about the helmet thing. He can't answer. I think he just asks for forgiveness out of desperation because it's like, have nowhere else to go. Can I please just like stay? Like, do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'd say he asks once and she says no. You've got to go and get yourself baptized in the mines of Mandalore because that's the stupid. Because water's going to change your life. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Will change your soul apparently. But yeah, so like, but then she doesn't like take his armor off him or take his. She doesn't take the Darksaber off him. She doesn't take any of the armor she's made for him off. Something we've missed, obviously, she makes something for Grogu. She
yeah,
doesn't take that off him. She lets him take
Oh,
that. She lets him just walk away, just to live his life with all his stuff. So I think she knows what she's doing, and she knows that by saying that, it keeps him sort of still wanting to be part of it, maybe down the line.
yeah. And did anyone else notice the way she tied that bundle up? The
oh
way
my gosh, yes,
did
my heart
did that
melted.
did it sort of look like baby Grogu's head?
I am
Was
calling that a Grogu knot.
yeah,
What do we think's inside? Do we think it's chainmail?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's like little chainmail armor for him.
Um, I think I've seen some artwork with Grogu in a sort of chainmail armor, so it does look quite cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the armor's playing a game. I think she wants Grogu in with the gang because she's a Jedi
yeah,
and he's in the clan with with Mando. So like the fact that she makes something for a foundling who he's just give away, who really shouldn't go back after, but she makes it for him anyway, knowing he's going to go after it, and then she sets him up to go after him. If you know what I mean. I think she's
yeah,
playing a big game here, like the master cult people do, like Charles Manson. Um, Charles Manson was able to manipulate sort of young men and women to go into the Hollywood Hills and kill for him without even thinking about it, without even realizing what they were doing was wrong until years later. So I think she's very the way she just like talks and the way she gives information. It's very compelling. And these guys obviously eat it out of her hand, like they're starving. But I think Mando's getting a bit wise to it, which I'll mention later on. Obviously, we find out Mando goes to get off this space station, off this ring, off this inhabited space area, and we get a little call back to Star Tours, the ride.
yeah.
Do you want to talk us through this bit, Jason?
I absolutely love this bit because obviously he gets greeted by this droid, which I believe is the same style of droid that used to act as your guide on the Star Tours
So
ride.
it's an RX droid.
That's it. I never remember the names of the droids, and I really should. But yeah, it's great the way you get this quite comical where this droid's being a typical droid. These are the rules you've got to do. And it says, you got to leave all your weapons here. And again, almost like the cult comment, you then get Mando say, "But weapons are my religion." um, and it's like, yeah, that's not going to wear. If you want to discuss it, talk to my manager, but you have to wait until tomorrow before you can even think about boarding. So Mando reluctantly gives in, and then several films have done this thing where you see someone taking their weapons and there's just weapon after weapon. And I was almost expecting the droid to sort of question whether Mando had given every weapon over. Um, but obviously, he has, and he says, "I know all the weapons that are in, or I knew everything that's in there." So that you've got all these weapons in the hold, and then we get this lovely little scene on the craft, which is typical. You get on an airplane and you've got an inquisitive child sat next to you, and this one happens to be, it's a Rhodian, isn't it? Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
I
she's a
did.
Yeah,
little
so it's a Rhodian infant and its parent, which I thought
Yeah,
was, it's one parent and the child, so it was very much like, I think when Mando sees the Rhodian child and the Rhodian parent, he's thinking of him and Grogu in that moment.
yeah, yeah.
definitely.
That was my take on that as well, and I have to say it gives. I think it's the timing that Bryce Dallas Howard held on Mando's helmet, where you can't see any facial expressions, but I found myself almost imagining I could see Pedro Pascal under the helmet. Did anyone else get that sort of vibe?
I think they're very good with how the helmet moves, slight tilts, the angle it's at.
Yeah,
Like that's all. If you can act within a mask, then you're a genius. If you take, for example, I think one of the best performances inside a helmet or a mask is V for Vendetta and Hugo Weaving.
yeah,
Like the amount of emotion that you get out of him with a mask that doesn't change, same as Mando's mask doesn't change. I think Pedro Pascal's got it down to a T. I think the way the guys know how to shoot him as well, to capture that human behavior, even though it's just a mask. I think it was
yeah,
all sort of simple storytelling stuff, but it's like captivating and magic when you get it right.
yeah, definitely. And that for me made then obviously the whole episode. Then obviously when he obviously arrives at Mos Espa, doesn't he?
I think it's
Um,
Mos Eisley.
it is actually Mos Eisley, is it? I don't
Yeah.
know. But and then we see this scene. Obviously, he's getting off the same craft that we'd seen the Pikes get off of a couple of episodes before. So that sort of, it's like everything's coming together at that point. So that sort of took me back to the Book of Boba Fett. We were in familiar territory. And I have to admit, once I saw he was back there, I sort of guessed where he was heading. Um, and yeah, it was from this point on, for me, it was quite a fun. It wasn't necessarily. It showed us how Mando has changed as a character, I think. And we got more back to. I think at the beginning of the episode, we'd gone back to Mando when we first met him. And then when he got back to Tatooine, I think we saw him go back to more how he progressed since he met Grogu and, the sort of bond he built there. And also, obviously, the bond he's built with several of the other different characters that come into the episode later on.
Yeah. Well, I think he said we know he's going to find Grogu. He's got that present for Grogu that the armor's made him, and
Yeah.
that's where he's heading. Obviously, he doesn't have a ship, which is why he's got to Tatooine, because he's had a call from Pelimotto that she's found him a ship. One of the things I love is that when we get to Tatooine, the droid service is different. The droid who unloads him, though it's the same type of droid, is like slightly misfunctional, can't speak properly. Almost if it's telling us, yeah, like Tatooine is a cesspit.
Yeah. Quite true.
So yeah, he gets all his weapons back, and then he sets off to see the next bit where we're in the sort of the docking bay of Pelimotto, as seen in Mandalorian seasons before. Kat, do you want to talk us through sort of the introduction of Pelimotto and what's going down there, and sort of everything that happens and all the awesome prequel tastiness that we get?
Oh my gosh, Pelly Motto and her perm. Ugh, I just love her character because she is so over the top. She is completely different to Din Djarin. He barely speaks a word. She speaks a mile a minute, and they work perfectly together on screen. Loved this entire sequence. I when Din Djarin comes to her her garage on Mos Espa, he is looking for a new ship to replace the Razor Crest because that ended up in smithereens from not The Mandalorian season 2, which probably definitely broke the hearts of anybody who bought the HasLab Razor Crest because it's not going to be seen again. Peli has a new ship for him, and anybody who's watched the prequels and saw that tarp was probably squealing before Peli even rips it off, because underneath is a Naboo N1 starfighter, as seen in The Phantom Menace, as flown by Anakin Skywalker, although it is in quite a few pieces and it needs a lot of repairing. I sort of love Din's reaction. Fans will be screaming at the screen at this point. Din is just wanting his money back. He's not particularly impressed by this hunk of junk. In fact, he does sort of paraphrase Han when he sees it. But Peli convinces him that this starfighter could be faster than a Favier. Nice little throwback there to The Last Jedi. And then it's like sort of two car mechanics in the car garage, sort of friendly, working together to try and fix this N1 starfighter up. And yeah, we definitely see the sort of season 2 Mandalorian here, because at the start he's definitely sort of in his own headspace, but here he's interacting with Peli, and we see him working with droids. The Mandalorian who hated droids is being nice to them. I think that really shows some character progress.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, let's go back to them. When she shows him the ship that's under the top, I had two thoughts. My first thought was, oh, is it the Naboo starfighter? But then I also thought, is it General Grievous's ship from Revenge of the Sith? The one that Kenobi steals to get away because it's a similar shape.
Yeah.
But my thoughts were totally prequel based, and obviously Top finally comes off like, oh, it is the N1, it is the N1, fantastic. One of the things that we did see obviously was the BD droid, which was first seen in the Star Wars game.
Jedi Fallen Order,
yes. The BD series droid. We got to see a live action one of those, and obviously we got to see Mando work with it quite closely. It helped them out and showing them, using its light to help him build stuff, and also produces a schematic when he's going to put the last bit onto the ship. So yeah, I think Mando, working with droids, I think he knows now, since his experience with IG-11 and what IG-11 did for him and what IG-11 did for Grogu, he knows that not all droids are as bad as the ones that killed his parents, sadly. Jason, what were your thoughts on Peli Motto and the Jawas and their interactions, and how the Jawas were just sort of essentially stealing from any ship that lands in the area?
This just cracked me up. And I've seen so many memes. I'm sure everyone's seen the version of Blind Date with Peli Motto and the three Jawas, and just the whole thing with, obviously, the sort of character that she is. It rings that she would definitely be using the Jawas in any way that she could, to get what she needs, and the fact that she's almost like these little guys to her are her type of people, which I just think's great, because she's almost like the Mandalorian version of Watto, but not devious and evil as Watto sort of came across as. Whereas this, Peli Motto is very much, there's a humour to her, and the way with the Jawas, obviously, they're bringing stuff for her, and Mando has suddenly embraced that he's going to have this ship as his, but he wants to modify it. So he wants to give them a shopping list, which they kindly go off and grab. And I'm trying to remember. There's one part that they bring back, and I can't remember what they described the part as, but it is actually exactly the same part that Han Solo used to hold the compactor open in A New Hope, which I thought was brilliant. And again, just goes to show the way they keep linking it back to all previous films and TV series. But obviously, there's the comment where she says, "I once dated a Jawa, very furry." There's just the whole scene's played with humour, but again, it goes back to where we saw Anakin building his pod racer, and obviously later on when we see Mando test driving his new ship, that very much harkens back to what we've seen in the Phantom Menace. So bringing the Jawas in, give it like they've done with the Tusken Raiders. They've almost started to humanize the Jawas and make them more of a character than a creature in the background, which I think is quite clever because these are all characters, all creatures that George Lucas introduced, 40 odd years ago. So I absolutely loved it, and I loved the comical interaction and Pelimotto getting cross with Din for when he hands over more credits than she'd already promised them. She said, "You're making me look bad." So yeah, for me, this just fitted in perfectly, and it also gave us a bit of a comedy rest from the more serious part earlier on in the episode.
Yeah, I think one of my best lines is when obviously she references the date one, and then obviously the Jawa says something in Jawa, and she sort of like, "No, I'm working on myself at the minute," as if the Jawas just asked her out again. They're right hitting the moment.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really good. I love the fact that they went and stole the part off one of the Pike ships as well.
Yeah.
So they're obviously quite fearless, and they'll just steal from anyone and get out and run away straight away. Kat, as someone who sort of grew up with the prequels, what was your thoughts on sort of Mando firing up the Naboo starfighter and taking it for its first spin? Just talk us through what you felt in that moment.
Oh, this is such a kinetic scene. I mean, sort of Mando's like a bit of like a big kid once he jumps into that N1 starfighter, and no wonder. Who wouldn't be? You've got a shiny new starfighter that you can take for a test flight, and the speed and the way they shot it as well from inside the cockpit. It was so good. It really put you in the moment and added to all the energy of that scene. So that when he's flying at those speeds, but he's still talking to Peli, and he's taking her through what the starfighter can do. And every time that Mando sort of finds a new thing that the fighter can do, he's sort of blown away because he's only flown the Razor Crest, and it's just it's like a get kid in a sweet shop. You're a Mandalorian in an N1 starfighter. It's I love that scene. And then when he does take it for a test spin, he does the Boon to Eve classic basically, because he goes through those canyons, and that the way the ship kept spinning around, particularly, it reminded me of the canyon chase from Independence Day. I don't know if anybody else got that. And yeah,
Definitely. The whole bit, seeing this canyon, there was a mix of so much adventure in it. I loved it.
And then you get that reference to A New Hope, and you get Beggar's Canyon with the Womp Rat. I was almost actually a bit disappointed that Din didn't at least try hitting the Womp Rat.
I did wonder if that was...
He had already shot a Womp Rat at Perimotto's garage, if you remember.
Yeah, so I mean, it would have been impressive if he could have done that. And then he takes it in a spin up into atmosphere and breaking the atmosphere. That spin, that reminded me again of Anakin in his N1 when he's fighting the battle at Naboo. He could do that kind of very fast spin. And we hear Din Djarin saying, "Dank Ferric, this is fast," which is sort of his go-to. And then basically then he just shows off. I mean, he's doing these spins and then he's sort of cruising around the commercial transport again. And we see the little Rodian and they sort of, it's not quite a wave, but it's a little acknowledgement, which does again feel like something sort of out of any sort of flight film.
Saw, but this is our first exclusive saver. It's ours, and we love it.
Go ahead, Kat.
And then we get to the point where Mando's been showing off a little bit too much. And we have a great moment where the X-Wings turn up again. It's like that sort of typical moment where you're trying out your new sports car and you get pulled over by the police because you've broken the speed limit. It's just such a funny moment because they're asking him for his codes, which don't match because the ship is brand new. And the X-Wing pilot, I can't remember his call sign now for the pilot who recognizes him.
It's the same pilot who was with Dave Filoni's Trapper Wolf character, isn't it, from The Mandalorian?
Yeah, oh, shame on me, I can't remember his call sign. But he recognizes Mando's voice. He's like, have we met before? Because your voice sounds very similar when I pulled over a Razor Crest. And you can see sort of Mando in his ship. And I love the way, again, with the mask, he just tilts his helmet and you can see that his cogs turning, you can see his mind whirring. And it's like, oh darn, I need to get out of this. And he does like a Fast and Furious. He presses his sublight thruster button to do a massive takeoff. And it's brilliant how fast that ship can go. Oh my goodness.
In that moment, it reminded me of the sort of the extra booster that Poe Dameron has on his X-Wing in The Last Jedi.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Which these X-Wings clearly don't have.
Yeah, so I think obviously he has it and he can use it, I think sparingly probably, I'd imagine, to sort of get out of those situations, which was fantastic. Couple of things I noticed, like when he's sort of flying the fighter through Tatooine, he takes it through Beggar's Canyon. He takes it through like the exact same places as the Boontaree pod race from Episode 1 of Phantom Menace. And some of the shots are like for like, and like or just like the same shot but reversed from a different angle. But it's the exact same, which I thought was really good sort of poetry. And then I love it when he finally lands and he gets out and he uses the Kitster line. That was wizard.
That also links with the High Republic now as well, because Padawan Ram Jurmaram uses wizard as his phrase. He uses it all the time throughout the High Republic adventures.
Fantastic. So yeah, pulling all of Star Wars together just with little subtle lines like that, which is fantastic. Kat, do you want to take us through sort of the end of the episode? Obviously, Mando has landed. He's happy with the ship. Perimotto's happy that the ship looks fantastic. And then we have a visitor to the hangar.
Yes, Din gets out, announces it's Wizard, and Pelly informs him that an old friend of his came calling, but she tried to lock this old friend out. It didn't work though, because from up in the rafters comes the voice of Fennec Shand as she dramatically jumps down a bunch of crates to tell Mando that Boba Fett is hiring, and she throws him a bunch of credits. But obviously, being the honourable Mandalorian he is, Din Djarin just says, "On the house." I love that. It's because it's him being honourable, but he does it in such a cool way.
Yeah, that scene then brought us completely back into the Book of Boba Fett. And it also, like you say, showed, you know, you've got this character that at the end of the second series of The Mandalorian had built up this group of friends almost. So it's now like everyone's being reunited. Although obviously we haven't seen Boba yet, but he's probably busy keeping everyone at bay in his castle.
Yeah, I think one of the things I liked was, you know, when he said it's for Boba Fett, and she said yes, and he goes, Mando, when it goes, it's on the house. I think that's him just going, you know what, it's like my so-called family just threw me out, but like Pelly, Motto, who I've become friends with, has sorted me out a ship here. So you know what, I'm going to do you a favour because I know that you've done good by me in the past as well. So it's sort of this newfound family he's got, this group of friends. He's keeping them sweet and being nice to them, which is fantastic. He did say he was going to see his little friend first before he would be back to help out. So I wonder if he's going to come back with Grogu.
I think that the next episode is going to be now Boba Fett getting ready for the all-out, you know, the final confrontation with the Pikes. But I don't know if Grogu's going to be brought back into it, and if they do, they could use it as a way of, you know, Luke's having issues or is off trying to find other Jedis. So he asked Mando to look after Grogu for a bit, I suppose. Who knows?
Or what if all three of them come back? What if Mando, Grogu, and Luke Skywalker come to help Tatooine?
Well, there are
It is Luke's
rumors
own planet.
and there are rumors of Han Solo coming into the fray, but I think that's more fan wishful thinking.
Yeah. I don't think the Luke's probably more of a possibility because, you know, Mando is going to see Grogu.
Yeah.
Grogu is with Luke Skywalker. So I think there's a possibility there. Did you notice that the X-Wing pilot, the new X-Wing pilot, the lieutenant, it was actually the guy who played Luke Skywalker in the Mandalorian season 2 finale?
Yes, it's Max.
Ah,
back as an X-Wing pilot, which is brilliant full circle if you think about it, because Luke was an X-Wing pilot as well.
that was what was bugging me, because I was thinking I know that face from somewhere and I couldn't work out where I knew it from.
Kat, do you think we'll see Mando in the next episode, or do you think it'll be episode 7?
No, I think Mando's gonna not be absent for episode 6 because he's going to go visit Grogu, and then I think he's going to come back for episode 7 for the big showdown with the Pikes. However, that makes me think, from what he's saying, then Mando actually knows where Luke is, and I can honestly picture like Luke sending Din Djarin like Grogu updates, like weekly Grogu updates. Here's a holo photo of Grogu eating. Here's a holo photo of Grogu lifting rocks.
And if that character post has to be believed, here's a picture of Grogu with his yellow kyber crystal.
Oh yeah. Here's Grogu making his first lightsaber.
Yeah, definitely.
Jason, do you think we'll see Mando in the next episode or just the final episode?
I think it'll be the final episode, and I'm hoping that we're going to see more of what's going on with Boba Fett. But you know, there's one thing I've learnt with all of these series, that they're bound to throw in something that we're not expecting, or we think, oh, we'd love to see this. Because I have to admit, I think I'd said previously I didn't think Mando was going to be in it at all, and not only did I fall short there, they gave him a whole bloody episode.
Yep. Kat, is there anything we've missed from the episode that you want to talk about and touch upon?
I think we've been very thorough, because I mean, there's a load of Mandalorian lore that we could talk about. I mean, we haven't talked about how we see that little clip from the Great Purge, what Yarma called the Night of 1,000 Years.
Yeah, let's talk about that Night of 1,000 Years, which is essentially the Empire's mass genocide of Mandalore, which, you know, the Empire love mass genocide. The mass genocide of Geonosis, to keep the Death Star secret. The mass genocided Camino to keep the clones a secret. And here we see the mass genocided Mandalore with the Night of 1,000 Tears. A lot of TIE bombers flying over. You see, the dome of the capital city getting bombed. And we see sort of the Rogue One security droids and the probe droids. It's very much a droid attack on Mandalore, it looks like.
Well, I mean, if you think about the bombs that they're throwing down, the way they're actually sort of sending up these like plumes of smoke and fire, they almost sort of look like atomic bombs. So I'm assuming that down on the ground, it's not safe for stormtroopers, so they have to send in droids. Not to mention, we know how good Mandalorian fighters are. They could take down stormtroopers. So I think sending the droids is more of a sure way. And what was quite sort of chilling in the fact you could actually see on the floor the empty Mandalorian helmets.
Yeah, it was quite I like the way they shot this sequence of the genocide of the Night of 1,000 Tears. I think for me it felt like it wasn't like shot like documentary footage. It wasn't like live footage. It was like almost like someone telling the story. If you know what I mean, it was like, it was a bit hazy. You couldn't see all the details. It was like the picture you would get in your mind of someone telling you about that event, which I thought was really cool. Really cool way to do it. Like I said, the way the droids' eyes were red and like the way the probe droids looked menacing in the sky, like it was very much like a fairy tale nightmare type of feel. Which obviously it is a horrible event that took place. Obviously, we've heard it referenced in Mandalorian season 1 and 2. And then here we finally get to see our sort of our first visuals of what went down. We still don't know why, but yeah, I'm sure we'll get more of that as Mandalorian comes back with season 3, I would imagine.
Well, I actually wonder if in Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed, the TIE Squadron, as part of that, were sent on a mission, and it was like one of the Emperor's fail safes, and I can't remember. Oh, this is annoying me now because I've only just thought about it. I can't remember the exact name of the mission, but they had a list of planets to which they had to bomb each, and I just wonder if like Mandalore was one of them.
Was that Operation Cinder?
That's the one. So I wonder if Mandalore was sort of part of Operation Cinder, because
Possibly.
we've seen in Rebels that Mandalore was one of the planets that really tried to resist the Empire for as long as possible.
Yep. Another thing what we found out is that the armor says that the Beskars used to make armor, not weapons. But obviously in Rebels we found out that Sabine was forced to make weapons for the Empire. Sort of, you know what I mean? So being forced to go against the sort of Mandalorian teachings. We also found out that this cult of Mandalorians were on one of the moons, one of the Concord moons, and that's why they weren't caught in the mass genocide, essentially.
And we know that a lot of the Mandalorians on the moons of Concordia were the ones that resisted Satine Kryze's rule. They were the Mandalorians who wanted to remain warriors, forming Death Watch. And I mean, the armor does have those tiny little horns on her helmet. I do wonder, was she part of Death Watch, and was she part of Death Watch under Maul's rule?
Possibly.
I think it'd be very interesting when we get more, hopefully, out of that. Hopefully we meet her again in season 3 of Mando and we get a bit more of her backstory, because I think those questions you've asked there are 100% the right questions to be asking. There's something more about this character, this woman.
I mean, is she a Mandalorian that we've met in Rebels? We don't just wearing the helmet. I don't know.
So he has a theory for you. So in season 7 of the Clone Wars, there's obviously the main commander for Maul's troops is it Garson?
Yeah, yeah.
And the Gar Saxon, yep. And the second in command is Rook Cast, isn't it? Who's a woman.
Oh, that could make sense.
So
Yeah.
is the armourer Rook Cast?
Ooh,
Maybe.
I like
Maybe not.
that idea.
I mean, I'm hoping sort of this is what the Mandalorian season 3 is really going to explore, is a lot more about the history and the lore of Mandalore, because now that we've sort of come into the canon timeline, all that stuff from Legends means that we don't actually know much about who the Mandalorians are now.
Yep. Jason, is there anything from the episode that you want to discuss that you think we've missed or haven't mentioned?
No, I think now that we've mentioned that bit about the sort of story of the Night of a Thousand Tears, I think we covered nearly everything. Just the more I think about it, the more there was bits and pieces all the way through this episode. It was quite a chunky one to look at in reality. And I forgive you, John Favreau, for not having it as an episode of The Mandalorian.
Well, that might not have been his call. Do you know what I mean? I think, I think we need to get used to doing linear storytelling. It's like one of the problems Star Wars has had since it got bought by Disney is that, it was like we had a saga movie, then an anthology movie, then a saga movie, then an anthology movie. And for the main cinema goer or the main TV watcher, they're not used to jumping backwards and forwards in time like that unless they've got like a cutscene or something that tells them the story like the Marvel universe does. It's in linear order. That makes sense. Or if it is a story that's told in the past, something in there brings it back to where it is in the present to easily explain it.
Yeah.
So that's the formula that works. So I think this was a case of, we need the Mando's going to turn up, but we need to know where he's at. So he has an episode of where he's at, and you never know, they might do an episode in The Mandalorian where it focuses on Boba Fett or focuses on someone else if it's to tell that longer term story of getting towards this super team up against Thrawn or whatever it is they're going for, if that makes sense, with the Ahsoka series as well.
Yeah. No, very true.
And I think obviously 7 episodes was always a weird number. Usually it's like things are in like even numbers, that makes sense. So maybe it was originally like a 6 episode season and they went, you know what, it's going to be easier to understand the end here if we put this sort of Mandalorian episode in the middle, and we'll give you the extra episode for it as well. So it's not actually going to eat into your 6 episode storytelling time.
Yeah, maybe. Definitely.
I think one of my favorite things was it was just full of like the whole episode was full of prequel and original trilogy sort of things that were just like subtly sprinkled in there, like the Womp Rat that's terrorizing Perimotto, the Womp Rat that's in Beggar's Canyon. I thought all the things of the Naboo starfight and it sort of copying the route of the pod race was fantastic. I thought the way Din Djarin made the Naboo starfighter spin, again, that line from Anakin in the Phantom Menace where let's try spinning, that's a good trick. It all sort of ties in very subtly in a tight bow. Was really cool. I love the difference from Tatooine and Mos Eisley to that first location of that sort of spaceport / space city. Sort of 2 very different types of location, but both very, very Star Wars-esque. I thought this episode had a lot in it, a lot packed in, even though it didn't really get us any further than the Boba Fett story. But I thought there was a lot of cool stuff packed in within this episode. Kat, what's your predictions for the next chapter, chapter 6?
Oh my gosh. I think when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett, just expect the unexpected, because I think the only prediction I got right was that the armorer was coming. I think that's the only prediction I got right from last time. Okay, so I think maybe now for chapter 6, Din Djarin is going to be absent because he's off visiting Grogu, because he no longer wants weekly updates from Luke. He wants to see Grogu in the flesh. So, I mean, Boba Fett needs more muscle. However awesome Din Djarin is as a fighter, to take on the whole Pike Syndicate on Tatooine, he's going to need more. So I'm assuming that we're going to maybe see some more bounty hunters or mercenary characters coming in to join Black Chrysanthemum and Din Djarin. But who that could be, I mean, it could be the Jawas at this point.
I've got a feeling we might see Mayfield.
You think?
Yeah, I've got something that I just think they brought him back in season 2 of Mando. He was allowed to go free by Fennec Shand and Mando and Cara Dune and Boba Fett, and I just think he's another one that he almost owes them all something, that you could almost see Mando popping in and saying, "Oh, can you come and give us a hand?"
Yeah, that could definitely work.
How big do you think Boba Fett's team is going to be? Because I think it needs to be a big team, judging by the amount of pikes that are on Tatooine.
It does, but hopefully he's also going to bring out the Rangor.
Yeah, I kind of sort of want almost like a full Avengers team up. The Rancor is like Hulk, and then you've got everybody else with their certain powers or abilities. So I want a full team up. I want a big team.
Yeah, you can almost hear the line now, can't you? Ha, we've got a Rancor.
Definitely.
I remember though, it's just a child Rancor. I think it wasn't full size, so I'd worry about relying on him in the battle with the pikes 100% because he might die.
The Rancor must be protected at all costs.
Yeah, so
don't rely on Hasbro.
Any closing thoughts, Kat, on anything that we've discussed? Or anything that's going to be coming?
I'm loving how it's linking. The Book of Boba Fett is linking to the Mandalorian. It's linking to Clone Wars. It's linking to Star Wars Rebels. I mean, Disney now, what they're sort of doing, especially with these series, is they are almost creating their own sort of multiverse in the sense that everything is connecting in some way, and characters are turning up from one show to another, and I'm just loving it.
I feel that's the Favreau and Filoni effect, and I do think that's the one thing that Disney are working out, that they know what they're doing and to trust what they're doing.
Yep. Jason, where can the people find you on social media?
Oh, it's at Hondo Ling.
And Kat, where can the people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Kat Kylo, both with Ks. Always happy to talk Star Wars or anything Kylo Ren.
And you can find me on social media on Instagram and Twitter at Jolly Jedi Pete. You can find the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Star Wars Podcast. And you can find the podcast on Twitter at Boars Star. Please check us out on there. If you're listening on Spotify, there is a new feature where you can give the podcast listen to a rating. So if you're listening to us on Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. It'll really help us out find new listeners. And also, if we go to book other guests, you can find us easier. And again, whether you listen to us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, Breaker, iHeartRadio, whatever it is listening to us on, if there is an option to give us a review, please consider giving us a top review. Again, it just makes it a lot easier and other people finding us and at booking further guests. But no, thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to speaking about the next episode with you guys.
Yeah, always a pleasure, guys.
Oh, it's been a dank ferric time.
Sure has. And listeners, thank you very much for listening. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.
Hello, Star Wars listeners. This is Savannah Odit. You might know me as host of The Dorky Diva Show with my co-host Brian Balance. I am also producer of The Adventures of the Zolan Dart, which is a Star Wars-inspired audio drama that we produced over the last year. If you love stories about smugglers, courage, heroic characters, and maybe a few foes along the way, you should go to thedorkydivashow.com and listen to The Adventures of the Zolan Dart today.
Shout! We've got your pigs.
Were any of the critters harmed?
What did you do now?
I didn't do anything. I just freaked out for no reason.
It was nice doing business with you again. Maybe next time we could deliver something less temperamental.
Now, what you call temperamental, I call fun.
Hey, is there a place nearby where I can make some repairs?
3 clicks south of here, you'll find a small spaceport. They should have what you need, as long as it's nothing too big.
Dynamic class? My stars, you don't hear about many of those still being space-worthy.
It's been in my family for a while.
She's pretty great. Any chance you have a hover cart we can use to load up?
I'll check out the HoloNet to see if anything new has come up in the sector.
My name is Sereth Khan. I am the chief here on Kamai. My people and I have been experiencing food shortages as of late due to unforeseen natural occurrences. We are looking to hire someone.
I say we take this one. The pay is great, and it's the type of job we're familiar with.
Welcome. You must be Captain Otoa. I've already sent word to Pac 2 to expect you in the next cycle or so.
You told him we were coming before we even accepted the job. That's rather presumptuous, isn't it?
Perhaps, though once I received confirmation that you were interested and on your way here, I couldn't help but hope.
Fair enough. Well, we'll be back as soon as we can.
Well, that's not good.
Is that blaster fire I hear?
So you're the one.
Captain, it sounds like they want to do this the hard way.
I love when they got some fight in them.
This is bad. This is bad.
We're about to have a lot of company.
I'll see you soon.